Let's talk about India. In this video, I'm going to deploy astrological analysis on all levels, from mundane to personal to karmic, in order to decode and unveil what awaits India in the coming years. We're definitely in a time of massive global transition and upheaval, which is completely epochal and historical, as the world is reshuffling itself and reordering itself, as the pecking order between the civilizations, which was established for a few hundred years, is now being changed in front of our eyes. And as the established economic and political blocks are being questioned, they're starting to change. And as the prospects of wars, of very large wars, are getting more and more real in front of us, in front of our eyes, in this time, obviously, when borders are being redrawn and when nations that had previously been delegated to secondary spots kind of in the periphery of the global economy, the third world, now are suddenly rising to become center key players in the world. In this time, obviously, it's going to be very important to see what India does. India is going to be a key contender for being one of the most important states, one of the most important powers and civilizations. In some way, it's its own civilization. It's an entire civilization, not just a nation, not just a country. So it's going to be important to understand what awaits India, which direction is India going to go in the coming years. And this sense of possibility, this sense of growth is very palpable. If you have been to India recently or in the last years, there's so much venture capital investment. But at the same time, there is also a rising tension, namely and most importantly, the tension between the Hindus and the Muslims. Now, when you add the populations of Bangladesh and Pakistan, which are basically part of the Indian subcontinent, the Indian civilizational sphere, you have over 500 million Muslims in the Indian subcontinent, which is more than you have in the Arab world, the entire Arab world together. And at the same time, you have now a resurgent Hindu nationalism and a resurgent Hindu identity, which is in many ways personified by Modi. Is this a recipe for disaster, or is it a challenge that India can tackle successfully and transform into something greater and better in the coming years? And this is what we have to ask ourselves. And when we look at the upcoming transits that India is going to experience, the cosmic transits, we can very clearly see that this challenge is going to become more and more remarkable, more and more marked and notable. So what you see here is the chart of the Indian Republic, and I have the transits outside. We're going to look at the chart in more detail. Just one thing that I want to show you is that you have this constellation coming up in 25, right? Which is very important for the whole world. Basically, it's a marker that I've discussed in previous videos. It's going to throw the entire world into a completely new phase. And this is the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune here in the first degrees of Aries, right? Both of them are going to Aries, and both of them are on the first degree of Aries, which is very important because that's the Aries ingress. It kind of sets the tone for the whole world year by year. And you're going to have Saturn and Neptune there in conjunction. They're going to be there for a couple of years, right? So what does it mean? So this constellation on its own means that we're going to see new religious movements, which is Neptune in Aries, and as well as more wars and clashes around borders, which is Saturn. And we're going to see a high degree of confusion around global structures. We're going to see a high degree of confusion around borders. And at the same time, we're going to see a radicalization of religious ideas and clashes around those religious ideas. Limitations and clashes around those religious ideas. This is the marker of this conjunction that is coming up. Now, this is for the whole world, obviously. But in India's case, this constellation, it falls in the 12th house, so it really impacts directly the collective unconscious of the Indian nation. And it's in a square, in a direct square to Uranus. Here you see Uranus, and Uranus is on the IC exactly, right? So we have in India Uranus on the IC. I'm going to look at this in a little bit more detail to tell you exactly what this means, but just keep in mind that this global process that will happen globally with the radicalization and the clashes around religions and the clashes around borders over the next couple of years, this is going to directly impact India on a unconscious, collective unconscious level. And it's also going to directly trigger India's innermost identity. And it's going to force India to reinvent itself, because that's what Uranus on the IC means. The need to reinvent yourself, the need to reinvent your identity from time to time. And here it's going to be directly triggered for a couple of years. So we can see here, India will have to reinvent itself in the coming time, in the coming years. And it's going to be around religion. The reason for this reinvention will have to be around religious community, strife, community tensions. Now, when you look at the chart, I'm not going to look too much at this. This is the Indian chart. You can see this is the chart of India, basically. As I said, the Uranus on the IC, it shows you the nation that has to reinvent itself periodically from time to time. That's the marker of this constellation. And then you have Jupiter with Venus. Obviously, the Indians are very good astrologers. They know when to do the foundation, and they waited for the Jupiter-Venus conjunction, the greater and the lesser benefic being together for a nation that is going to have very prosperous dealings with everybody globally. And interestingly, you've got here Russia directly with that Jupiter-Venus conjunction. Russia is a great business partner, always going to be for India, despite all the pressures from the West. India will not stop to do business with Russia. It's very profitable for both. And you've got Karl Marx and Robin Hood here as well. So India also has had always a streak of social communitarianism, egalitarianism. Prometheus is here too. And a couple of other things which I'm not going to go too much into. China and Washington are both here on the MC or in the 10th house. Their relationship with them is very important in some ways. China, the asteroid China you can see here is actually in a direct square with Mars and Aries. Okay, Aries is on the ascendant. Aries is strife and agitation, right? Aries means the constant strife, the constant arguments. So the mythology of Aries is the sense giver of this. And you have the Mars here. Mars, interestingly, here with Arabia in the 7th house. And this is in a square with China, right? And as I mentioned already, the Uranus at the IC, which stands for this periodic need and urge and necessity to completely reinvent yourself, right? Which in some ways you can say Modi coming to power, like in the beginning when he first came to power, it was a reinvention. It was a real reinvention of India, right? India was not known as a Hindu nationalist state. It was known as a multi-faith, pluralistic state under Congress before. This was not the India that anybody knew. India reinvented itself. But the point is, this was not the last time that India has to reinvent itself. It will have to reinvent itself again. And interestingly, it will have to do so in the third term of Modi, in the third term of Narendra Modi. So let's look at Modi and see what Modi brings to the table. I'm not going to mainly look at Modi's birth chart, but I will look at the chart of the third inauguration, because that's the very important chart that tells you the challenges and opportunities and the tasks of the third term, of Modi's third term, because that's what really matters. But his birth chart itself obviously is very important too. And when you look at the birth chart, we have a Jupiter on the IC, right? So he's highly beloved by his people. He gets, a huge and very powerful karmic inheritance. I actually have a lot of information in this chart here, and I have some very, very strong insights into who Narendra Modi was in a previous incarnation. I'm not going to do this in this video because this is another topic, but if you want to know that, and if you want to get the insights on that, let me know in the comments, please. Let me know in the comments, even if you think yourself even if you have yourself some ideas on this, if you want to know who Narendra Modi was in a previous incarnation, and it's someone very big and famous, then let me know in the comments below. Let me know if I get enough people asking for it. I will do a video specifically on the karmic background as well. But just now to go back, we have in his chart, we have a Jupiter on the bottom, on the IC, so he's highly beloved by his people, and he gets this very powerful karmic inheritance and heritage and legacy from his people, from his ancestors, from his prior incarnations, which is very powerful. And this is in a trine with Uranus, you see? So with Uranus, so he is somebody who, he can be part of innovation. He can be part of movements that bring innovation, right? He can be somebody who innovates a country and a civilization. He's also a fighter. He's got Mars on the ascendant. Like, he takes no shit from nobody. Very powerful fighter with Mars in Scorpio on the ascendant. The moon is with Taj Mahal and Samadhi. This is another part of the inheritance. And we have a lot of other placements here as well that I'm not going to go into too much, because as I said, what I really want to focus on here is the chart of the inauguration. The chart of the third inauguration is what we want to look at. So the inauguration chart, it's calculated for the exact time that Modi took power for the third time. The third term was inaugurated when President Draupadi Murmu took the oath of the Prime Minister. And this inauguration chart, it shows us the challenges and the tasks and the nature, the essence really, of this term, of the third term. And what you see here, when you look here, is that you have a very strong seventh house, okay? And this is actually also, when you look at Modi's transits, which is something else, Modi's personal transits, you're going to have a lot of seventh house, eighth house stuff happening in the coming years. So this prime ministership, this term is going to be very much focused, much more so than previous ones, on partnerships, on foreign policy partnerships, right? And Modi directly himself will be the one who's going to make very big moves on foreign policy partnerships. Now, what we see here as a concerning thing is that we have China here, the asteroid China, with Mars. You see this? Asteroid China is with Mars, and it's with the asteroid Eris again. So just like in the national chart where you had China and Eris squaring Mars, you now in the inauguration chart, which is, you know, many decades later, obviously, but you can see that the cosmos has its meaning and it has its cycles and it has its patterns that meaningfully interlock and interact with each other. And you can see that you have here China with Eris. Eris stands for strife and never-ending arguments and conflict, basically. And this is with Mars. And Mars obviously stands for direct confrontations. And this is part of this T-square here. You can see this T-square, which is also quite difficult, of Moon opposite Pluto. You see here, Moon opposite Pluto. So this Moon opposite Pluto, it adds a very intense element to this term. This term is going to be marked, this term of Modi, on the one hand, it's going to be marked by very successful partnerships, right? He's going to make some great partnership deals, right? With everybody who's ready for it, with Europeans, with Russians. You know, he's going to make some great partnership deals because of India's kind of non-aligned position or kind of independent position. You know, there is always, when a lot of, you know, the other blocs go to war, India positions itself smartly. It can benefit a lot because it's going to be the one that can make deals with everybody, you know, make very beneficial deals with everybody, you know. And that's something that Modi certainly is going to do. And it's going to benefit economically a lot, the country, right? You have here the Jupiter directly on the descendant, right? Directly conjunct the descendant together with Mercury and Sun. You know, big deals for expansion of trade. But then you're going to have this very problematic Pluto Moon opposition. And this means what? This means a very intense and difficult strife inside the people, moon is the people, right? Moon is the people in a national mundane chart. Inside the people itself, there's going to be a very hard and difficult and dark transformative urge, which is, which can get very manipulative and dark. And this is going to include who? On the moon, we've got the asteroid Hagar. Hagar, you can see this here? Hagar. What is Hagar? Hagar is the asteroid that stands for Islam. It stands for Islam. Why? Because Hagar, it was the wife of Abraham who was sent into the desert. And, Abraham was the whole story with, his first wife have a child. So he had a child with Hagar. And then he had a child with the first wife. And then he sent Hagar away. And Hagar's son, Ishmael, became the forefather of the Arabs and of Islam. And the other wife, Sarah, her son, Isaac, became the forefather of the Jews. So symbolically, Hagar stands for Islam. So what we have here is a deep, transformative strife and internal battle going on amongst the people of India, which will impact his term. Obviously, this is about the term, about his political third term that he has to deal with. So it shows you what he has to deal with. And this strife is going to also directly get fueled somehow by the ongoing, never-ending arguing and battling with China. You see here, China. And now, here's another interesting thing. Who else is here? Jerusalem is here too. Jerusalem is here too. This is interesting. Why? Because India, it looked like it was one of the few states which, in the recent times, it was maintaining good relations with Israel, despite, everything that's been going on and all the condemnation that Israel has had basically from everybody in the world apart from the West. The Western states are the only states that are supporting Israel and continuing to support Israel. Apart from that, the entire world is not. And India was an exception so far because they kind of tried to maintain good relations, but at the same time, India has also been improving its relations markedly with the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia, with Iran. India has very good relations with Iran. And if you look in the chart here, you have Iran. Actually, Iran is here on the sun here, and Africa is on the sun as well. I said before, India is going to make a lot of big deals in these coming years that will expand its economic power a lot. And who will these deals be with? We have Brussels here, Europeans. We have Manhattan here, Americans. We have Africa here, Africa. India is expanding a lot into Africa, is becoming a major player. And Iran we have here too. This is interesting, and it kind of shows you the way that India is playing all sides, is continuing to play all sides. And finally, you also have here on the MC in his inauguration chart, you've got Concordia and Juno, which stand for partnerships. Both of them stand for peace and partnerships. And they're on the MC. This is very good. It bodes well for peace, right? Concordia and Juno, and they are with Arabia. Okay? Partnership, peace, like good partnerships, and it stands with Arabia. And this is on his MC, so what you're widely seen as, what this term will be seen as or known as. So when you put these elements together, my estimate is that in the coming years, despite the great business deals that Modi is going to do, in the coming years, there's going to be a very big intensification of strife between the communities in the Indian subcontinent. It's going to pick up a lot. And Pakistan will start to go crazy in a couple of years, in 25, 26. I have another video on that, which you can see below as well. And as this happens, India will have to reinvent itself. And if Modi is strong enough, he will be the one who leads that reinvention of who India is. And as surprising as this may sound right now, there is a distinct possibility that he appeases the Muslim populations of his own subcontinent, of the own Indian civilizational sphere by expanding ties with the Middle Eastern countries, with countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia. And that he does so by actually severing ties or changing relations and making relations worse with Israel. And you can see this as well in Narendra Modi's personal chart, where Israel is actually on his Uranus. So the sudden change, the unpredictable relationship, Israel is here on the Uranus. So these are a couple of predictions and insights that I can give you. It's going to be very interesting to see and to further observe what happens in this massive space and on the trajectory of this great civilization. And if you want to know about different players, if you have different questions, different things that you want to see, let me know in the comments. Also, subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so yet. Very important. Like this video. Let's boost this and get this out there. Let me know in the comments what else you want to see and which questions you have. And also, I'm open to taking consultations again. There are some free spots. You can find those when and if you're interested as well in the links below. And until the next times, I wish you all the best and be blessed.